The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, painting golden stripes across the marble counter. The aroma of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee filled the air as Dr. Elena Ward moved briskly around the kitchen, her movements methodical, almost military. Biscuits for Marcus, pancakes for Leela, and scrambled eggs for Julian. Each dish crafted with care, as if a perfect breakfast could hold her family together. But midway through slicing a tomato, her hand went slack. The knife clattered against the cutting board. For a second, she thought it was fatigue. Another late night at the firm, another early morning pretending everything was fine. But then, the numbness spread like a slow tide up her arm. "Elena?" Marcus's voice came from the hallway, drowsy and distant. She tried to call out, but her words came out warped, a sound she didn't recognize. Her right leg buckled beneath her. The stool toppled, the world tilted, blurred, and then silence, except for the hiss of bacon burning on the stove. Marcus's shout broke the spell. "Elena, what's wrong?" His robe flapped as he sprinted into the kitchen. Seeing her collapsed on the floor, his expression froze between disbelief and horror. She wanted to speak, to tell him it wasn't as bad as it looked, but her tongue refused to obey. "Leela! Julian! Call an ambulance!" Marcus shouted. Their daughter appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, trembling. "Mom," she whispered. "Oh my God, Mom!" Within minutes, sirens wailed outside. Paramedics filled the room with urgent voices and metallic tools. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. Snippets of words reached her. Stroke, time critical, she's fading fast. The ride to the hospital was a blur. She caught glimpses of flashing red lights against the city skyline. Marcus's pale face beside her, his hand gripping hers too tightly. When she awoke, the sterile white of the hospital ceiling stared back. Machines hummed softly. A woman in a blue uniform leaned over her. "Dr. Ward, you're in County General Hospital. You've had a stroke, but you're stable now. You need rest and we'll take care of everything." Elena tried to nod, but her body didn't respond. Panic swelled in her chest. She looked toward the door expecting Marcus, but he wasn't there. Hours later, he arrived with the kids. He smiled too quickly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The doctors say you'll be fine, sweetheart. Just focus on recovering. The trip's already paid for. Remember, you'd want us to go, right?" The words hit her like another blow. The trip? He meant their family vacation, to the Shushels, the one she had planned, saved for, worked endless nights to afford. And now they were still going, without her. Her heart rate monitor beeped faster. How had her life, so full of control and precision, come to this moment of utter helplessness? As the door closed behind her family, Elena realized something chilling. Maybe the stroke wasn't the only thing that had paralyzed her life. 3 weeks earlier, life had been perfectly scheduled, or so it seemed. Every morning, Dr. Elena Ward began her day at precisely 6 a.m. The rhythmic hum of the espresso machine marked the start of another carefully planned day. At 52, Elena was at the height of her career, a senior financial strategist at a leading firm in Atlanta, respected, admired, and quietly feared. Her colleagues called her the Oracle for her uncanny ability to predict market shifts before they happened. Precision was her comfort zone, control her shield. That morning had been no different. She stood in her sleek kitchen, dressed in a tailored navy suit, reading stock updates on her tablet while flipping omelets. A few strands of silver gleamed in her dark hair, tied in a low bun, the only sign of age she hadn't yet conquered. "Mom, can you spot me 1200 until Friday?" Her daughter Lila, 27 and forever between jobs, leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "My agency's late with my payment again, and I can't miss my spin class subscription renewal. It's part of my image." Without hesitation, Elena opened her banking app. "Transferred," she said flatly. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best," Lila chirped, already lost in her screen. Moments later, her husband Marcus entered, his robe hanging loosely, coffee in hand. His once scholarly charm had softened into weary resignation. Once a promising history professor, now just another overworked community college lecturer. "Elena," he said between yawns, "don't forget I'll need the car this evening, alumni dinner." "I can't," she replied, sliding his breakfast plate across the table. "I have a client meeting at 6. You'll have to take the train." Marcus sighed, but her steady gaze left no room for negotiation. "Fine," he muttered, retreating to his newspaper. Just then, Julian burst in, 25, full of restless ambition and little direction. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," he said, kissing her cheek. "Got the transfer, starting at a new firm tomorrow. This one's the real deal." Elena didn't look up. "You said the same thing 2 months ago." "This one's different," he insisted. "Of course it is," she replied quietly. By 8:30, the kitchen was empty. She stood alone amid half-eaten breakfast and open mugs of coffee. She gathered her briefcase, took a long breath, and whispered to the silence, "Just a few more months." That evening, on her train ride home, Elena scrolled through pictures of turquoise water and white beaches, the Seychelles resort she had been saving for. 2 weeks in paradise, all expenses paid, her gift to the family. Maybe there, she hoped, they'd remember what togetherness felt like. But that night, returning to her spotless home, she found untouched dishes, a frozen dinner instead of the chicken she'd asked Marcus to defrost, and the same old silence. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began adjusting their budget again. Work harder, save more, plan better. Her fingers trembled as she typed. A tiny pulse in her temple throbbed, unnoticed. Elena thought she was buying her family happiness, but she didn't yet know the price would be her own health. By late February, Elena Ward had turned her life into a meticulous machine. She rose before dawn, cleaned what others left undone, answered emails before sunrise, and stayed at her firm long after the lights dimmed. She wasn't just managing portfolios. She was holding her entire family's comfort together like a fragile web. The Seychelles trip had become her quiet obsession. It started as a fleeting dream, a photo ad on her phone of overwater villas and crystal lagoons, but quickly evolved into her mission. If she could just give her family this one perfect moment, maybe the constant distance between them would fade. Night after night, she sat by the glow of her laptop, recalculating expenses. If she canceled the bathroom remodel and took on 3 extra client accounts, they could afford it. If she skipped her weekends off, the few she still allowed herself, they could travel in luxury. At the firm, her colleagues noticed the change. "Elena, you're pushing too hard," her assistant warned one afternoon. "You haven't taken a single sick day all year." "I'll rest when I'm on the island," she replied, forcing a smile. Home wasn't much of a refuge. Marcus had grown used to her endless work hours. The children's calls always started with, "Hey, Mom, can you help me with?" and ended when she said yes. No one asked how she was feeling anymore. Perhaps they assumed she was indestructible. By March, the plans were finalized. First-class flights, an ocean view villa, and excursions already booked. When she finally revealed the surprise at dinner, she expected cautious excitement. What she got instead was an eruption. "The Seychelles? Seriously?" Lila squealed, leaping from her chair. "Mom, that's insane. I've always wanted to go there." Julian blinked, stunned, then began searching pictures of the resort on his phone.
Wow, you weren't kidding. This place is incredible. Even Marcus smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Are you sure this isn't too much, Alina? I've planned it all, she said, her voice bright and tired. It's time we had something special. The next 2 months became a blur of work and fatigue. Marcus worried less about her and more about flight schedules. Lila shopped obsessively for beach outfits. Julian bragged to his friends about the trip. Alina's hands trembled more often now. Her vision sometimes blurred during meetings. She blamed it on stress, on age, on too much caffeine, on anything but the truth that her body was breaking beneath the pressure she had built herself. One evening, she paused in front of her reflection before bed. The woman staring back looked like a stranger. Eyes hollow, hair dull, the faintest tremor in her fingers. 3 more days, she whispered to the mirror. Then I'll rest. But rest would not come from the shores of the Seychelles. It would come in the cold, sterile silence of a hospital room.
The morning of the collapse began like every other. Dr. Elena Ward woke before sunrise, mind already racing through her checklist. 3 days left until their family trip to the Seychelles. The flights confirmed, the villa booked, the passports organized. She wanted that morning to feel different, celebratory. Biscuits and gravy for Marcus, she murmured to herself. Pancakes for Lila, scrambled eggs for Julian. She moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, the clatter of pans and hum of the coffee maker blending into the rhythm of routine. Outside, the early light spilled across the quiet Atlanta suburb. It was peaceful, the kind of morning that makes you believe life is stable, predictable. But as Elena reached for the pepper grinder, her hand trembled. The movement was small, almost unnoticeable, until it wasn't. The tremor turned to numbness, a strange, creeping detachment that spread from her fingertips to her arm. Her breath caught. The knife she held slipped from her hand, clattering against the tile floor. A flash of heat swept over her face, followed by cold. What is happening to me? Elena? Marcus's voice drifted from the bedroom. You okay? She tried to answer, but what came out was garbled, a sound that wasn't language. Panic bloomed inside her chest. She gripped the edge of the counter, willing her body to obey, but her right leg gave way. The room tilted, the stool toppled, then the world fractured into sharp edges and silence. The crash jolted Marcus from his morning fog. Elena? He shouted, running barefoot into the kitchen. She lay motionless, her face pale, her eyes wide but distant. Oh my God, Leela, Julian, call 911. Within minutes, the house filled with the chaos of fear. Drawers slamming, voices overlapping, the shrill tone of the emergency dispatcher echoing through the speakerphone. Ma'am, is she conscious? The voice asked. She's trying to speak, but it's not making sense. Marcus's voice cracked. The paramedics arrived quickly. Their calm precision only deepened the terror. Severe stroke symptoms, one murmured to his partner. We need her on oxygen. Move fast. The sirens wailed as they carried Elena out. Through blurred vision, she caught glimpses of Marcus's face, frightened, helpless. Lila stood in the doorway, hands pressed to her mouth, while Julian hovered near the curb, frozen. At the hospital, bright lights and antiseptic air swallowed her world. Voices swam around her. ICU, right-sided paralysis, speech impaired, terms she once recognized all too well from medical reports she'd once read in passing. Now they applied to her. When she woke later that night, Marcus sat by her bed, his hands clasped together. His face was drawn tight with exhaustion. You're going to be fine. You just need rest. Don't worry about anything, okay? The kids and I will handle everything, even the trip. The trip, the word echoed in her fading consciousness. He meant it literally.
As Elena's eyes fluttered shut, one thought pierced through the fog. Maybe her family's idea of handling everything didn't include her at all.
The hospital room smelled faintly of disinfectant and flowers that hadn't yet arrived. Dr. Elena Ward lay half reclined in her bed, her body a reluctant stranger to her commands. Her right arm felt like stone, her tongue heavy and slow. Each word she tried to form came out twisted, alien. The neurologist had been direct. "You're lucky, Dr. Ward. The stroke didn't damage your memory, but you'll face a long recovery. Physical therapy, speech rehabilitation, lifestyle changes." Lucky. The word rang hollow. That evening, Marcus arrived with Leela and Julian. They carried the same polite expressions people wear to funerals. Leela's eyes were puffy from crying, though her phone screen still glowed in her hand. Julian tried to smile, but couldn't hold her gaze for long. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked gently, sitting beside her. Elena opened her mouth. "Tired," she managed to whisper. Each syllable was a mountain. "That's okay, sweetheart. You rest." Marcus hesitated, glancing at the folder he carried. "Listen, about the trip." Her pulse quickened. Marcus continued, voice measured, almost rehearsed. "I talked to the travel agency. Canceling now means we lose almost everything we paid. The flights, the villa, non-refundable. It's a fortune, Elena." She stared at him, trying to process the words. Lose the money? The thought of them going without her felt absurd, cruel. He leaned forward, placing his hand on hers. "You just focus on recovery, okay? The kids and I will go. You'd want that, right? You planned it for us. We'll send pictures every day." Leela chimed in, her tone too bright. "It'll only be 2 weeks, Mom. You'll have nurses in therapy here. We'll be back before you know it." Julian nodded quickly, avoiding her eyes. "Yeah, Mom, we already arranged for Mrs. Tilda next door to check on you. She'll bring meals." Elena felt her throat tighten. She wanted to scream. "Don't you see? This trip was for all of us, not for you to enjoy without me." But all that escaped was a fragile sound, a ghost of a word. Marcus lifted the folder. "We just need your signature, love. Power of attorney for the accounts so we can access spending money while we're there. It's standard procedure." Her hand trembled as he guided a pen into her fingers. Her writing came out jagged, barely legible. She felt tears slide down her cheeks, not from anger, but from disbelief. When they left, their voices faded down the hall, already discussing sunscreen and flight check-ins. The room grew still. Only the rhythmic beep of her heart monitor reminded her she was still there, still alive. Outside, the city lights shimmered in the distance, beautiful, distant, unreachable. In that silence, Elena realized something she'd avoided for years. She had built a life where she was indispensable in function, but invisible in love. As the door clicked shut, Elena's gaze hardened. She couldn't move her body, but her mind had just taken its first step toward freedom. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes everything in a hospital room feel colder. Dr. Elena Ward lay motionless, her body half paralyzed, her mind spiraling through fragments of betrayal. She could still hear Marcus's voice echoing, "You'd want us to go." Would she? A soft knock broke her thoughts. The door creaked open, and a woman in blue scrubs entered, carrying a tray with oatmeal, tea, and a kind smile that didn't feel practiced. "Good morning, Dr. Ward. I'm Nurse Dana Fields. How are we doing today?" Elena blinked in response. Speaking still took monumental effort. "Don't worry," Dana said warmly, adjusting the bed controls. "One word at a time. We'll take it slow." There was something in her tone, not pity but respect, the kind of voice that treats you as a person, not a patient. Dana began chatting as she checked Elena's IV line. "You're quite the celebrity here. The neurologist said you're a financial strategist, big firm downtown. That must take some brain power." Elena managed the faintest smile, her left cheek twitching upward. "That's better," Dana said softly. "Now let's get you strong again.
Hours passed. The nurse helped her eat, helped her stretch, helped her feel human again. For the first time since the stroke, Elena felt something resembling comfort. That evening, the door opened again. Not Marcus or the children, but Mrs. Tilda, her elderly neighbor from across the street. The older woman bustled in, carrying a paper bag filled with homemade cornbread and a jar of sweet tea. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, setting the bag down. "When I heard what happened, I came right over. Marcus said y'all had to take some emergency trip, but I told him I'd check in on you." Emergency? Elena forced the word through her struggling lips. "Yes, dear. Something about non-refundable tickets or whatever it was. He said you gave them your blessing. Such a generous soul, even in your condition." Elena looked away, her heart sinking. So that was the story Marcus told. An emergency trip and a willing wife who'd encouraged it. After Mrs. Tilda left, the silence returned. The truth burned in her mind. Her husband and children hadn't just abandoned her, they'd quietly stolen her entire life.
The words hung in the air like a verdict. Dr. Elena Ward stared at the papers Nurse Dana Fields had laid out on her blanket. The bold letters at the top read, "General Power of Attorney." Underneath, her shaky signature bled across the page, the one she had been too weak to question, too trusting to read. Dana's voice softened, though her eyes were sharp. "They can move money, sell property, even make decisions about your medical care. You practically handed them your life, Dr. Ward." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. She couldn't even lift her hand to wipe them away. Why?" she managed to whisper. Dana's jaw tightened. "Because people like them count on people like you. Generous, tired, and too sick to fight back." The nurse took a deep breath. "We're not going to let that happen. Do you have anyone you trust? A lawyer? Maybe a close friend?" Elena's mind flickered back to a name she hadn't thought of in years. Attorney Harold Benton, a respected corporate lawyer she'd worked with during her consulting days. He had once told her, "If you ever need an honest man in a crooked room, call me." With trembling effort, she murmured his name and phone number. Dana scribbled it down and nodded firmly. "Leave it to me." By afternoon, Harold Benton himself stood in the doorway of Elena's hospital room, tall, composed, his silver hair immaculate and his briefcase gleaming. "Elena," he greeted, his tone both formal and familiar. "When Dana called, I cleared my schedule. I came as soon as I could." Emotion swelled in her chest. "Thank you," she stammered, her voice halting. Harold set his briefcase on the table and began scanning the document. His brow furrowed deeper with every page. "Good heavens, this is outrageous. No notary seal, no witness verification. It wouldn't even hold up in court." He turned to Dana. "We can act quickly. We'll file a revocation of power of attorney immediately and notify her banks to freeze all accounts. That should stop any unauthorized transactions." Dana exhaled in relief. "I knew you'd know what to do." Elena looked between them, hope flickering in her weary eyes. What happens to them?" she asked softly. Harold's expression hardened. "That depends on what they've already done. But for now, we protect you first. Then we deal with them." He pulled out crisp legal forms and began drafting the revocation statement right there on the hospital table. Each stroke of his pen felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of power she thought she'd lost forever. As he finished, Harold looked up. "I'll have these notarized and delivered within the hour. Your account will be locked before the end of the day. From now on, no one touches your finances but you." For the first time in weeks, Elena felt her chest rise in something that almost resembled pride. Her family thought she was too weak to fight back, but while they lounged on the beaches of the Seychelles, Elena Ward was quietly rewriting her destiny. By the next morning, the legal machinery was already in motion.
Attorney Harold Benton had filed the revocation of power of attorney, notified every financial institution connected to Dr. Elena Ward, and placed temporary freezes on her accounts. It was a defensive web woven with precision, exactly the kind of strategic thinking Elena herself had once been known for. When Harold returned later that afternoon, he carried a folder thick with documents and a faint smile. "It's done," he announced. "Your husband and children will find that every card, account, and property record they try to access is locked. The law is officially back on your side." Elena's lips trembled into the faintest hint of a smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Harold replied. "You just need to keep getting stronger. But there's something else we should discuss." He set a blank set of papers on her bedside tray. "Your will." Elena blinked in confusion. "From what I can see, the last one you wrote was over 20 years ago. Everything you've built, your properties, stocks, savings, is currently willed equally to your husband and children. After what they've done, I suspect that's not how you want it to stay." The thought landed with quiet weight. For decades, her entire life's work had gone into supporting the 3 people who had left her in a hospital bed. Every late night, every missed vacation, every extra project, all of it had been for them. But who had stayed by her side when she couldn't move or speak? Not Marcus, not Lila, not Julian. It was Dana Fields, the nurse who treated her like a person, not a burden. And Harold, the man who showed up without hesitation when she needed help most. Her fingers twitched against the blanket. "Yes," she said slowly, her speech still labored but resolute. "I want to change everything." Harold met her daze. "Tell me how." For the next hour, they worked carefully. Piece by piece, Elena rewrote her legacy. A portion of her estate was to fund a rehabilitation charity for stroke survivors. Another was to establish a scholarship for young neurotherapy specialists. And yes, a personal bequest for Nurse Dana Fields, who had shown compassion when no one else had. When the notary seal was finally pressed against the pages, Harold leaned back with quiet pride. "There," he said softly, "you've just created something bigger than yourself, something they can't take away." Elena's tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they weren't from grief. They were from clarity. She wasn't just taking back her money, she was reclaiming the meaning behind it. As Harold packed his briefcase, he smiled. "Rest, Dr. Ward. The next battle is recovery, and that, I think, is one you can win." As the sun dipped beyond the hospital window, Elena felt a strange peace, unaware that the phone would soon ring with the desperate voice of the man who had betrayed her.
That night, the hospital was unusually quiet. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor had become background music to Dr. Elena Ward's thoughts. For the first time in months, her mind wasn't calculating expenses or deadlines. It was simply clear. Nurse Dana Fields helped her settle in, dimming the lights. "Try to sleep," she said softly. "Tomorrow we'll start light physiotherapy." Elena nodded. "Good night," she whispered, her words still careful but improving. Hours later, the stillness of the room was broken by the sharp buzz of her phone on the bedside table. She hesitated, then managed to reach for it with her left hand. The name on the screen made her chest tighten. Marcus Ward. She answered. "Elena, thank God you picked up." His voice was urgent, threaded with frustration. "We're at the airport. There's a problem with the card. It's being declined for the baggage fees. What's going on?" She closed her eyes for a long moment, then said softly, "The accounts are frozen." "What?" Marcus's voice cracked. "What do you mean frozen? I'm at the counter, Elena. The kids are waiting. We can't board until—" "The power revoked," she said slowly, deliberately. "You don't control my money anymore." There was a pause, a stunned silence heavy enough to fill the entire room. "Elena, honey, listen to yourself," he said finally, his tone shifting from panic to manipulation. "You're not well. This isn't you. You're confused. The doctor said there could be cognitive effects." Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "I'm not confused, Marcus. For the first time, I see clearly." His voice rose. "We have flights, reservations. You worked for this trip. Are you really going to waste it?" "No," she said, her tone like quiet steel. "I already wasted years on people who never saw me." "Elena, please," he snapped, his desperation breaking through. "Think about Leela, about Julian. They're counting on this." She took a slow breath. "They can count on each other now." And then she hung up. For a moment, she simply stared at the dark screen, her pulse steady. Then the phone vibrated again. First Marcus, then Leela, then Julian. Message after message flashed across the display. "Mom, what did you do? You're overreacting. We'll talk when we get there. Just fix it." Elena silenced the phone and turned it face down on the tray. For the first time in years, she didn't rush to fix anyone's chaos. She lay back against the pillow, letting the hum of the machines and the distant rain lull her to sleep. Outside, the storm clouds rolled over Atlanta, a fitting soundtrack for a woman who had just reclaimed her life. By morning, Marcus wouldn't just be stranded at the airport. He'd discover that his old life had vanished right along with his access to Elena's world. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and shining. Inside the hospital, however, tension brewed like a storm about to return. Dr. Elena Ward had barely finished her breakfast when she heard raised voices in the corridor. "You don't understand," a man was insisting. "She's my wife. I have every right to see her." The nurse at the front desk replied calmly, "Visiting hours begin at 4, sir. Doctor's orders." "I'm not waiting," he snapped. "This is a family emergency." Elena recognized the voice instantly. Marcus. Her pulse quickened, but not from fear, from something colder, clarity. The door swung open, and Marcus burst in, his face tight with anger and confusion. He looked like a man who just watched his kingdom crumble, because he had. "Elena," he began, voice strained, "what have you done? They said all the cards are frozen. We couldn't even check in at the airport. Do you have any idea?" "I do," she interrupted softly. Her speech was slower than before, but her tone was iron. He blinked, momentarily thrown off by her composure. "You're not well. You're making rash decisions. Everyone's saying you're confused after the stroke." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not confused. I'm awake." Marcus took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You're acting like a stranger, Elena, after everything I've done for you?" Her laugh came out short and bitter. "Everything you've done for me? Marcus, you left me here. You took our trip with my money. You even made me sign my life away." He winced, his eyes darting toward the open door, as if afraid someone might overhear. "That's not fair. You said we should go. You wanted us to enjoy what you worked for." Her fingers twitched on the blanket, the faint tremor of restrained fury. "I said nothing. You chose comfort over compassion, and now you're paying for it." "Elena, please," he said, his tone turning pleading now. "You're angry, I get that, but freezing everything, filing legal motions, you're destroying our lives." "Our lives ended when you walked out of this room," she said softly. The door opened behind him, Attorney Harold Benton stepped in, crisp suit and calm authority radiating from him. "Mr. Ward," he said coolly, "you're not authorized to visit outside scheduled hours. Also, any further attempts to interfere with my client's medical care or finances will be considered harassment." Marcus turned, color draining from his face. "You can't be serious." "I am," Harold interrupted, "and so is she." For a long moment, Marcus stared at Elena, searching perhaps for the submissive wife he once knew, but all he saw was a woman who had finally stopped apologizing. He left without another word. When the door closed, Elena exhaled deeply. Her voice trembled, but her spirit didn't. "Thank you," she told Harold. He nodded. "You don't need to thank me, Dr. Ward. Just keep moving forward." Marcus thought he could intimidate the woman he abandoned, but he didn't know yet that Elena's next move would erase him from her life entirely. 2 weeks later, Dr. Elena Ward sat in the same hospital bed, but everything around her had changed. Her right arm, once useless, now twitched with the first sparks of control. Her speech had improved, her spirit, unrecognizable from the woman who had once depended on everyone but herself. Across from her, Attorney Harold Benton organized a neat pile of documents on the table. "These," he said calmly, "finalize your petition for divorce." Elena looked at the papers for a long moment. "Divorce," she repeated softly, tasting the word like something foreign but freeing. Harold gave a slow nod. "You've already secured financial control, frozen joint accounts, and restructured your assets. This is the final step." Nurse Dana Fields, standing near the window, turned toward her with quiet support. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Dr. Ward?" Elena's gaze was steady. "I've been ready for years. I just didn't know it." With careful precision, she lifted the pen in her left hand, her dominant side now, and signed her name. The letters wobbled, imperfect, but they were hers. When she set the pen down, she felt lighter, as if she'd just shed decades of weight. Harold smiled faintly. "Congratulations, Dr. Ward. You just reclaimed your life." Dana clapped her hands softly. "Now that's something worth celebrating." Elena's lips curved upward. "Not yet. I'll celebrate when I can walk again." And she meant it. That afternoon marked the beginning of her hardest fight, not in court, but in her own body. Physical therapy was grueling. Muscles burned, joints protested, and exhaustion clawed at her after every session. Yet she refused to yield. "Again," she told the therapist whenever she stumbled, "we do it again." The mirror in the rehabilitation room became both enemy and ally. She watched herself struggle, fail, and rise. Every small movement, a raised arm, a crooked step, was a victory she refused to overlook. Dana visited her every day, cheering her on with gentle jokes and firm encouragement. "You're stubborn," she would say. "That's half the battle won." "I learned it from life," Elena would reply with a crooked grin. By the end of the month, she could walk short distances with a cane. She began to read aloud each night, training her speech. Her voice no longer trembled. It carried weight again. And as she grew stronger, so did her resolve to turn her ordeal into something meaningful. People survive strokes, but they don't always know how to live after. Maybe I can change that. Dana smiled knowingly. "You don't just want to recover, you want to rebuild." Elena nodded. "Exactly." As she took her first unaided step across the therapy floor, Elena had no idea that her recovery would soon become a mission, one that would change countless lives, not just her own. The day Dr. Elena Ward left the hospital, the sky was wide and brilliantly blue, the kind of sky that almost dared you to begin again. For weeks, she had watched the world through the narrow frame of her hospital window. Now, standing at the entrance with her cane in hand, she felt both terrified and free.
Take your time, Nurse Dana Fields said beside her. You don't have to rush. Freedom's not a race. Elena smiled faintly. No, but it's a start. Waiting at the curb was attorney Harold Benton, holding open the door of a black sedan. He'd insisted on personally escorting her to her next stop, a small rehabilitation apartment near the city's Park District, arranged through his network of contacts. You'll have privacy, medical access, and peace, he told her as they drove. Everything you need to focus on getting stronger. Elena looked out the window, the city blurring past. Peace, she repeated softly. I almost forgot what that felt like. The apartment was modest, but full of light. A single bedroom, a small kitchen, and a balcony that overlooked rows of trees just beginning to bud. It wasn't the home she had once shared with Marcus, full of marble countertops and cold silence. This place was smaller, but it breathed. When Harold left, Dana helped her settle in. You'll do fine here, she said, adjusting the cushions on the couch. I'll stop by every day for your therapy sessions, at least until the outpatient team takes over. Elena nodded, gratitude in her tired eyes. I wouldn't have made it this far without you. Dana smiled, shaking her head. You'd have made it anyway. You just needed someone to remind you you're allowed to. The first week was rough. Every morning, Elena awoke before dawn, determined to walk a little farther than the day before. She spoke into a voice recorder, reading articles, news headlines, and even poetry, anything to strengthen her speech. Some days she cried in frustration when her leg refused to cooperate. Other days she laughed, amazed at her own stubbornness. But every evening she crossed another small victory off her list. By the second week, she could climb the 3 steps leading to her balcony without help. From there, she'd watch the sunset, her cane resting against the chair beside her. The air smelled like spring, like something reborn. One afternoon, as Dana was leaving, Elena called out, Do you think people like me ever truly recover? Dana paused at the door. Physically, yes. But the rest, the part inside, that's where the real work begins. After she left, Elena sat in the quiet and thought about that. She had her strength back, her independence, her future, but now she needed something else. Purpose. As dusk deepened, an idea began to form, one that would turn her suffering into something meaningful, something lasting. Elena didn't know it yet, but the center she was about to create would heal far more than just broken bodies. It would mend spirits, including her own.
2 months after leaving the hospital, Dr. Elena Ward had regained most of her strength and something even more valuable, direction. Every morning, she followed a disciplined routine, stretching, reading aloud, light exercise, then a walk through the park with her cane. Her steps were slow, but her gaze was steady. She no longer felt like a patient. She felt like a survivor, testing the limits of her new life. One afternoon, after her walk, Nurse Dana Fields arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee. Still beating the sunrise? She teased, handing one to Elena. Habit, Elena replied, smiling. You don't work 25 years in finance without learning how to wake before the world does. Dana chuckled and sat beside her on the balcony. You know, most people your age would have taken that stroke as a sign to retire. You're rebuilding your whole world. Elena looked out at the trees below. It's strange, she said thoughtfully. I used to think my life's value was in numbers and profits. Now I think it's in people and what we leave behind that helps someone else stand again. Dana tilted her head. You're thinking of something. I am, Elena said. When I was in the hospital, I felt trapped, not just by my body, but by silence. No one talks about recovery as life after, only survival. I want to change that. I want to build a place that gives stroke patients more than therapy, a community, a second chance.
Dana's eyes widened. A rehabilitation center? Elena nodded slowly. Yes, but not just physical therapy. Support groups, counseling, career guidance, a place where people can rebuild their lives, not just their limbs. For a moment, Dana said nothing, simply studying her friend. Then she smiled, her eyes soft with admiration. You really don't do small things, do you? Elena laughed lightly. If I'm going to start over, I might as well do it right. They spent the next hour sketching ideas on a notepad. Dana, with her medical background, listed what patients needed most: adaptive equipment, emotional support, structured rehab programs. Elena thought about funding, space, branding, outreach. The collaboration flowed easily, as if the idea had been waiting for them both all along. Later that night, when Dana left, Elena sat at her kitchen table surrounded by scribbled pages. The vision had come alive in her mind, bright and urgent: the new life support center. She could already see it: wide hallways filled with sunlight, laughter where there had once been fear, people rediscovering hope one step at a time. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "This time, I'm building something that truly matters." On her desk, her phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. "Mom, it's Julian. Can we talk?" Elena stared at the message, unsure whether to answer.
The next morning, Dr. Elena Ward was finishing her notes for the new center when a knock sounded at her door. She expected Nurse Dana Fields, but when she opened it, her breath caught. "Mom?" It was Julian, standing awkwardly in the doorway, thinner than before, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded and stepped aside. He entered like someone walking into sacred ground, unsure of his welcome. The living room was filled with folders, sketches, and pamphlets, early plans for the new life support center. Julian glanced around, fidgeting. "You've been busy." Elena sat down, motioning to the chair across from her. "I have." He hesitated before sitting. I got laid off. The firm downsized. I've been looking, but nothing's worked out. Rent's due next week, and..." He trailed off, rubbing his hands together. "I need help, Mom. Just for a bit, until I get back on my feet." In the old days, she would have opened her banking app before he even finished. The reflex to rescue him was still there, tugging softly, but she ignored it. "Julian," she said evenly, "how long have you been out of work?" 3 weeks, he muttered. "I've been trying, I swear." "I believe you, Julian, but tell me something. What's your plan?" He blinked. "My plan?" "Yes," she said gently. "If I gave you money today, what would you do differently tomorrow?" His eyes dropped to the floor. "I just need time." Elena's tone softened. "Time is fine, son, but money without direction just delays growth. You're a trained lawyer. You can figure this out. You're capable, more than you think." Julian looked up, surprised. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying I won't give you money, but I will help you find work. I still know people in the legal field. If you want guidance, I'll make calls. If you want cash, you'll have to earn it." He stared at her, hurt flickering across his face. "You've changed," he said bitterly. "You used to care." "I still do," she replied softly. "I'm just caring the right way now." For a long time, he said nothing. Then, with a frustrated sigh, he stood. "I'll figure it out myself." "I know you will," she said, her voice calm, certain. When the door closed behind her, Elena sat back and exhaled slowly. It didn't feel like rejection. It felt like release. For years, her love had been measured in money. Now it was measured in truth. Outside, the late afternoon sun glinted against her sketches for the center. The same warmth she once poured into her family was now flowing into something new, something that wouldn't take her for granted. The morning sunlight poured through the glass doors of the New Life Support Center, washing the lobby in a warm golden hue. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. Dr. Elena Ward stood in front of the wide windows, dressed in a soft blue dress that matched the center's new logo. Her cane rested nearby, more a symbol now than a necessity. Around her, staff members moved briskly, arranging flowers, adjusting banners, welcoming the first guests. Her heart fluttered with nerves and pride. "It's real," she whispered to herself. Beside her, Nurse Dana Fields grinned. "You built it, Elena, every inch of it. You turned pain into purpose." Elena smiled, eyes misting. "We built it," she corrected. Soon the room filled with people, stroke survivors, caregivers, doctors, friends. The air buzzed with conversation and hope. Cameras flashed as the ribbon was stretched across the entryway. Elena stepped up to the small podium, her hand trembling just slightly as she adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon," she began. Her voice was steady, clear, a small miracle in itself. "A year ago, I lay in a hospital bed, unable to move or speak. I thought my life was over, but it wasn't. It was being rewritten." She glanced at Dana, then at the crowd. "This center exists for everyone who's ever had to start again, not just in body, but in spirit. Here, we rebuild together." Applause filled the room, genuine and warm. Elena bowed her head slightly, emotion threatening to break through her composure. As the ceremony continued, guests mingled, toured the bright therapy rooms, and admired the photographs of recovery stories lining the walls. For the first time in years, Elena felt something pure, belonging. She was speaking with a donor when the air in the doorway seemed to shift. The room quieted slightly. Standing there, uncertain, was Marcus Ward. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, his once carefree face marked with regret. When their eyes met, he hesitated, then approached slowly. "Elena," he said softly, "you look incredible." "Marcus," she acknowledged, her tone calm, "what brings you here?" "I heard about the center," he said, his voice low, "and about everything you've done. I had to see it for myself. And to say," he paused, swallowing hard, "I'm sorry. For the trip, for the papers, for not being there when you needed me." For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. The old Elena might have softened instantly, eager to smooth over the discomfort. But the woman standing here now had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing herself from the weight of bitterness. "I believe you're sorry," she said finally, "but I'm not the same woman you left behind." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I can see that." She extended her hand, steady, unshaking. "We can't fix the past, Marcus, but maybe we can wish each other peace." He took her hand briefly, and for the first time in years, there was no anger between them, only quiet acceptance. As he left, the applause from the next room swelled again, pulling Elena's attention back to the present, to the life she had built from the ground up. Elena had faced illness, betrayal, and loss, but one final realization still waited for her that night, under the calm glow of the city lights.
That evening, after the guests had gone and the lights of the New Life Support Center dimmed, Dr. Elena Ward stood alone on the balcony of her apartment. The city spread out before her, alive, glowing, full of stories still being written. She set her cane aside and leaned against the railing. Below, she could hear the faint hum of traffic, the laughter of people heading home, the rhythm of life moving forward. For a long time, she had believed her life had ended the day her body collapsed in her kitchen. But standing there, feeling the soft night breeze against her skin, she realized it hadn't ended. It had finally begun. The doorbell rang. When she opened it, Nurse Dana Field stood there, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I thought you might need company," Dana said, stepping inside. "Always," Elena smiled, motioning to the balcony. They sat together in the quiet, sipping tea and watching the lights shimmer across the skyline. "You did something remarkable today," Dana said. "Most people would have built walls after what you went through. You built doors instead." Elena smiled faintly. "For years, I built everything around other people. My job, my marriage, my children. I thought giving was the same as living. Turns out they're not." Dana nodded. "So what's next for you?" Elena thought for a moment, then looked out at the glowing sign on the building across the street. New Life Support Center. "For once, I don't have a 5-year plan," she said with a small laugh. "I just want to keep helping people stand again, in every sense of the word." Dana raised her mug. "To standing again." Elena clinked her cup gently against hers. "And to not sitting down for anyone who doesn't deserve it." They both laughed, the sound easy and real. Later, after Dana left, Elena lingered on the balcony, watching the horizon turn from violet to deep blue. Somewhere in that vastness, her children were finding their way, maybe struggling, maybe growing, and Marcus, she imagined, was beginning his own reckoning. She didn't wish them harm, she simply wished them understanding. She picked up her journal, something she had started keeping during her recovery, and began to write. "I lost everything I thought defined me, and in losing it, I found myself. I learned that love without respect is dependency, that strength isn't the absence of pain, but the choice to rise through it, and that forgiveness isn't a gift to others, it's the key that unlocks your own freedom." She closed the journal, smiling to herself. The city lights reflected in the glass window beside her, mingling with her reflection, older, wiser, stronger. The woman staring back wasn't the one who collapsed on her kitchen floor. She was someone entirely new. Outside, the first light of dawn began to bleed into the sky, soft and golden. Elena breathed deeply, feeling the quiet peace of a life rebuilt, not perfectly, but authentically. Because sometimes losing everything isn't the end of your story. It's just the moment you finally start living it.